Genuine conversations with unique minds on the threats, the complexity, and the geopolitics shaping our world. This is the Entropy Podcast with Francis Gorman.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Entropy Podcast. I'm your host, Francis Gorman. Before we dive in, if today's conversation challenges you, sparks a new idea, or sharpens how you think about the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys staying curious. Today I'm joined by Patrick Lechner, the co-founder of Resumate. Patrick is a business and cyber resilience specialist with more than 10 years of experience in crisis management, security, and resilience strategy. Patrick is a former IT and security director and Big Four Cyber Risk and Resilience Strategy Director. He has managed major global events, including banking runs, humanitarian crises, and cyber incidents. Patrick holds a master's in management and information technology from the University of St. Andrews. And Patrick, it's lovely to have you here with me this morning.
Thanks, Francis. Looking forward.
Patrick, I've been looking forward to this conversation because it's a team that has kind of, become more visible in the last while with DORA in Europe and I suppose the geopolitical landscape, the whole thematic of resilience and cyber resilience and operational resilience and all the facets of resilience have kind of come to the fore. So can I ask you, what do most organizations misunderstand about resilience?
I think when it comes to resilience, the one thing I feel, having observed over the last decade or so, is that there's a misconception that unless you have very sophisticated frameworks in place and really heavy processes in place, you're not resilient, right? And if you can't show that you have done a very extensive business impact analysis and continuity plans and have hundreds of them, you're not resilient. I think that's the biggest misconception across any organization. Every organization has resilience. People are resilient. People are able to improvise. They know how their processes work. They know that they need to see how they can sustain operations if something goes wrong. So, yeah, I would say the misconception that you only have resilience once you have the right frameworks and processes in place. I think that's the one big thing.
And I was looking at your website before you joined the call, and your strapline just kind of, it flows nicely off the tongue for one. So, we built Resumate because we were tired of resilience being measured by plans, not outcomes. It's a beautiful sentence. Can you talk to me about it?
Yes, I think it goes exactly what I just said. I think over the past 10 years or so, we were all obsessed with, looking at different standards and frameworks and putting the processes in place. And unfortunately, somewhere on the way, we started optimizing for documents, I feel, rather than actually looking into have we enriched our resilience or not. So what I mean with that is, you mentioned DORA, you mentioned the regulations everywhere. I think they can be incredibly helpful and valuable in giving a common language and helping set the baseline for an industry. But at the same time, especially with companies where they have maybe more stretched resource constraints, we often end up then optimizing for the actual document, for the evidence. So we're not taking regulations or standards or framework and say, okay, what can I take from here? And then really help me enrich my resilience, but more really focus on, I need to have this documented, I need to have that documented. So then people are actually spending much more time chasing other people to like, hey, you got to fill this spreadsheet in because, by the end of the quarter, we promise to have 70 BAs done. And this BCP, this continuity plan hasn't been reviewed in 3 years. So we should review that because we promised that, 80% of our BCPs will be reviewed. So we get into this whole, optimizing for documents and completely lose track of, well, how is that actually going to help us if something hits us? Will we be able to absorb that? Will we be able to sustain our minimal operations and continue? Based on my experience, and that spans across different types of crisis situations, it's not the plan that's going to help you in the end. It is definitely not going to be the spreadsheet or the PA that was done years ago that will help you actually sustain your operations.
That's really interesting because perfection by PowerPoint and the lovely Excel spreadsheet. Every organization has them, and when you go, how do you meet your DORA compliance? How do you recover from X, Y, and Z? We pull out what do we pull out. We pull out a run book or a lovely slide deck that says A, B, C, and D. But what you're scratching at is that's great, but when crisis actually lands, they're not the things you go to first. Can you talk me through a little bit of what you've observed in the wild? So you put all the effort into the paperwork, etc. Then something bad happens. How does it play out in reality?
I think in reality, and that also for me was quite a journey to realize, and I think it changed over the years when I started off in the bigger consulting world where we work with large enterprises building out all these processes and plans. But um, when I then was responsible operationally as well for leading incidents, it was clear that it's never going according to plan. Yeah, and there is huge, immense value in planning. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying planning is bad. Actually, there's this Eisenhower quote, right? That plans are useless, but planning is indispensable, and I think that's true. So here's the issue: the plans are actually optimizing for I have this and this requirement, but then in reality something else hits you, and then you struggle because maybe your crisis management team never really got together. Maybe there's no shared understanding of what actually the principles we're operating by now, and much more I think the human aspect of the building the right capabilities that whenever something comes you're able to respond to that. And I think one big shift in my thinking that happened over the years is at the beginning was a lot of things about threat scenarios, all the bad things that can happen to you, and then you have like a dozen risk scenarios and so on. But when it comes to resilience, Francis, I think if you think about it, it's usually your loss scenarios, right? So resilience capabilities, you need them. You need to be resilient when something goes wrong and when you lose something. And usually you can bring any type of threat scenario down to kind of like 5 loss scenarios, something around you lose a site, or like you use an office space, like in the pandemic, right? You lose people, your workforce, you lose systems, you lose maybe a supplier, maybe you lose data. And then the question is, what do we do then? And I think there is the true value in looking more into kind of like the bigger picture. How do we handle loss scenarios rather than very specific run books for this threat scenario and that threat scenario? Big caveat: if you have a security operations center, if you run technical incident response, it matters a lot. When it comes to resilience management, it's much more the bigger picture on how to sustain your business operations in the end.
That's really interesting, Patrick. And there's something in there as you're talking. I'm joining dots in the back of my head that kind of goes that the real life test happens with the BAU teams, but the collation of the data and the definition of the plans and run books and all of these other things in the planning phase are normally done by projects in most large organizations. So they're contract resources or they're point in time resources to pull that activity together. And then there's a bit of a handover, but a lot of the knowledge actually leaves the organization or moves on to something else within the organization. And then, as you say, when the moment hits, when that impact comes, the teams that should have the muscle memory actually haven't gone through the planning process to the extent that they're familiar with it enough. And then that's just saying the humans cracks start coming because the plans, well, they're not, you haven't lived them. It's like typing into ChatGPT, create me an instant response plan, and then having to enact it. You don't have the muscle memory.
Exactly. And I think this is where we get it wrong as well. I think over the years we have overcomplicated what resilience actually means. And again, it goes back to this, if you optimize for documents, if you optimize for frameworks, you end up there, right? You get external help in, they may do an incredibly good job in defining all your, critical business services and functions and processes, document everything down. They may even identify the RTO and the RPO and, all the great stuff that the standards and regulations require. But then the people that actually would be the ones that have to sustain operations during a hit, they are like, at best, they have been part of a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop, and that's it. And I think there's another component around ownership, which a lot of us get wrong in a way that we feel the business has an ownership of completing certain things, meaning, we need business to complete this BA, we need business to complete this and fill in the spreadsheet here. And then we're wondering, why we have such a bad ownership culture, when in reality, the ownership is anyway with them. It's an ownership of decision, and that means also ownership of prioritization. So I should acknowledge and accept and actually empower the business as well to understand, hey, you own it. No one needs to explain a COO that, service delivery and continuity of the delivery is important, right? Of course, it's part of their whole accountability set. So handing over that ownership, or not, empowering them for having that ownership to also make a decision, how much resilience, confidence do we need, do we want, what capabilities do we need from a business perspective. So rather than just asking them to fill in spreadsheets and so on, it's really giving them as well the opportunity to say, hey, what do you worry about? How confident do you feel that if something hits us, that you will be able to sustain your operations, right? If this one core system is down, for example, we had this case with a hospital where there's this clinical information or the patient information system, and everyone's like, well, without that system, we cannot operate. So then the question is, really? Really? Like, no, it always must run. It's like, well, but what if it doesn't run one day? Like, yeah, probably we could do this, and that. And that was the moment when ownership was clear, right? They own continuity of the process, but then they also own how much they want to do. So it shouldn't be, us resilience professional telling the business all the stuff they have to do, and especially not filling in spreadsheets, but really giving them a clear picture of, these are the things, this is how your business runs, this is how we run, these are the things we need. And based on then decide where we want to invest, where we want to improve, from a business ownership perspective.
If there's board members listening here today and this is resonating with them in terms of a resilience question, is there key kind of areas or topics or questions they should raise on the agenda to get answered within their organizations?
I think from a board perspective, what I would be most interested in is how confident are we that we can sustain our operations if we lose the key dependencies, right? It's not a black or white answer, because it has a lot of different nuances. But I think the confidence levels across the business, and that may fluctuate and vary as well, is really important. And why do I say confidence level? Because that is the piece in the end that tells me, do I have the capacity? Do I have the competence? Do I have the skills, the authority to actually sustain operations? And I will see in some areas it's great and in others not. And then I can go a level deeper. So like, okay, if we would lose core IT infrastructure, what would that mean in this and this area? If we lose this and that core supplier, what would that mean? And how would we actually do that? So I can then drill deeper. But I think it all starts with understanding who owns actually the continuity responsibility, and then enabling those people that they have the right capabilities in place.
No, great insights, Patrick. I always think of a house and its foundations first, and good foundations make sure the house sustains the storm or whatever bad weather is coming. If you're a chief operating officer today and you're looking at your resilience footprint, what are the key pieces you need to get right so that foundation is solid, that you can build on? You're not going to have a perfect house on day one, but you can edge forward towards that over a number of years. What are the key steps I need to put in place?
I think there are thinking. I think a house is a great analogy. I think there are two modes of operations in resilience, and one is basically building capacity, and the other one is using that capacity. And it's almost similar to like a sports team. You train a lot throughout the year, and then a couple of times you're actually gonna need it. And the basis, the foundation of your training, of your building the house, is really how do we actually work as an organization, right? So what is our mission, and what is our purpose, and why do we exist, and what do we really care about? That gives you already so much, right? In a hospital, obviously, you care about patients being treated well, and in a more economical environment, you care more about adding economical value. So really understanding what's the purpose of organization and what's the underlying operating model. How do we operate? What is the external dependency, the input we have? How do we organize our self-organization? What are the key services we are delivering to achieve that? And once I understand that picture, then I can really say, okay, what are the things that we are most worried about? So your foundation is you need to understand how your organization actually works. Then you can build the first walls in terms of, what are the things we actually worried about from a loss perspective that I mentioned before. And then you start putting the roof on and say like, okay, the kind of capabilities that going to protect us then from the rain and from the storm. And once I have that picture, I can start putting furniture into the different rooms. And I will need different furniture, right? In the bedroom, in my operations team, I need a different furniture than I need maybe in my sales team, in the kitchen. And, so I think there we need to be clear that there's no one size fits all in putting the furniture into the rooms. But when it comes to the overall house, understanding your business, understanding what you care about, and then what capabilities you need to protect that.
I'm going to follow through with the furniture now and keep that analogy alive for the house, just because we've gone down that rabbit hole. Patrick, so when I think of furniture, I'm thinking of the business dependencies. From your experience, are there any dependencies that get overlooked until the point where a disruption occurs? Is there kind of facets in organizations that people forget to put the chairs in the room with the desk, or anything in that
Yeah,
way?
here's the thing. No, if you think about it, right? If you ask, now this gets interesting, but if you ask the person who is responsible for the kitchen, right, they will not forget that they will need an oven, right? And they will not forget they need a pen. They will not forget that they need a knife. They know that, right? Because they use it all the time. Now, if we sit somewhere as resilience professional and try to type into our favorite LLM, what does a kitchen need? That can help in terms of saying, hey, we worked this out. Let's validate, is that what your kitchen needs? So in terms of dependencies, right? Are these the systems that you're using? Is this the data set you're using? The supplier. So that's stuff, that's information that's already somewhere in today's organization. And I think with AI, we have really as well an opportunity to accelerate a good way of doing resilience. And so, yeah, I think the stuff that's been overlooked is maybe something that's not obvious immediately. So electricity will be needed in the entire house. So it does come up, and it's a natural single point of failure. It's actually also in any organization usually a single point of failure. But there might be other things running through the house where you say, okay, we need that in different places, but we haven't really thought about that yet. Wi-Fi connection, you probably want to have it in the entire house. And so nonetheless, there might be shared components in different rooms that only once you create the bigger picture and you start connecting the dots, you understand, I actually need, for lack of better idea now, but I need something to clean every room, but I don't need that operationally immediately. So it only comes up when I connect the dots and say like, hey, actually this capability I need everywhere. So your single point of failures, your blast radius analysis, right? These are the things you can only do once you start, as you said, connecting as well the dots.
I'm so happy you said electricity there, because my mind was floating around Active Directory, out of band communications, everything bar the one thing they all require to keep the lights on, which is the electricity. So like I think there is, making sure the kitchen guy is in the room and the office guy is in the room, all of those heads do need to come together. I think that plays back to what we said earlier on in the conversation around the BAU teams maybe being in a 2-hour workshop, and that is done. Like, it's so important to have all of the different levels of expertise, that multidisciplinary kind of knowledge set within the organization. Because like, obviously electricity is required, but my mind didn't go there because I'm a cyber guy. I was thinking technology and interdependencies of technology sets. Electricity. Oh damn.
And that is where I think the loss scenarios become really important, Francis, because it's if you try to figure out every threat scenario now as well with frontier AI, right? Everyone is scared that the world will end. I don't think I don't think it's the ending. I think maybe it's the beginning of something new and great. But you don't know, right, what's going to hit you. And it's probably something different from what you thought it would be. But then if you lose that component, if you lose your Active Directory, if you lose your electricity, right, do we know what to do, right? I always like the electricity example because it's so obvious, right? And then it doesn't matter whether you lose your electricity because of a snowstorm or because there's a general outage or, there was some construction site outside. If your electricity gone, it's gone, right? And the kitchen people are going to be freaking out for the fridge, right? Because you have to continue cooling down your stuff. And the person in the home office is going to freak out for, not being able to doing their work. And so that means in the same house you have different impacts, but it's the same event, right? It's your loss of this component, and then what does it mean? And anyone who believes that a business impact assessment with hundreds of rows or like 60, 70, 80, 100 BCPs with 10, 20 pages is going to save you or help you even. Sometimes these things, Francis, can become a liability as well, right? If we believe in stuff that was developed once, put aside, and then we try to orchestrate all of that. I would much rather believe that the person working in the kitchen actually knows what to do and hopefully have thought about how to cool stuff for a short period of time.
No, that's really insightful, Patrick, and even the way you've just went, but it's a single event there has kind of jumped out at me as well, because you think of all of the different scenarios, but a lot of those scenarios come back to singular event types, and if you can cater for the event, then the scenario doesn't really matter because you're dealing with that piece. So that again is interesting. What I always find when I talk to resilience people, there is so many subtleties hidden in the conversation that are obvious, but nobody ever says them out loud, which is, I really enjoyed it. I also love the way we've kind of gone into a culinary side of it now as well. Patrick, can we talk about cyber resilience versus we're a secure organization for a minute, please? Because I this comes up quite a bit in different conversations I have, where people confuse the security of the organization with the resilience of the organization. So let's say we spent 20 million euro in the last 2 years on cybersecurity tooling and processes and improvements, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're resilient.
Exactly. And I think the cyber one makes it quite easy actually to show as well. So now, and I'm sure that the listeners, wherever, in whatever organization you are, there's a whole spectrum of how, if we take the Frontier AI, for example, right? That's a really great example. What's your strategy for all the developments, all these models that with very little human interaction and intervention can actually, connect different vulnerabilities, even low-level ones, and then escalate that at a speed that's very basically impossible for humans to catch. You can take multiple different strategies here, right? And some take I need to prevent even more, I need to patch even faster, I need, to ingrain certain practices even deeper, access management, network segmentation, all of these things. And they're incredibly helpful also from a resilience perspective, right? So network segmentation, isolation, redundancy, immutability, right? These are all great capabilities that you can put in place beforehand. But believing, right, that all this stuff will help you, that nothing ever will happen, and then you never have to even worry about getting to a situation where you have to respond. I think that's the biggest misconception in between security and resilience. And I'm not academic about definitions, right? I think the business is not academic about this either, right? It's basically, we for sure want to prevent certain things. We for sure want to do our due care in order to protect our business, our customers, and what we care about. But we absolutely need to be realistic that, what are actually our capabilities, that if something goes wrong, that we can absorb a hit and then we can sustain our operations. And from a cyber perspective, I think there's like so many different facets. Again, if you think about traditionally, there was always this concept of, well, if one data center fails, I'm gonna, fail over to another one, and then the other one is going to save me. Now with the large scale cyber compromises, we know, that may actually not be true, because you'd fail over the compromise into the second one, and then everything is compromised. So you need to have an ability to restore from a completely maybe brownfield, greenfield, but definitely, tertiary environment that's clean. So I guess the key points are prevention and doing your due care in order putting the controls in place and making them also efficient, effective. Absolutely, yes. But if you don't have the capabilities to actually absorb a hit and continue your operations, and also have that conversation with the business that, IT may not be here all the time. What does that mean to you? Or I can put in all the locks I want in my house, so no one is gonna, break into my house and steal something. But still something, I can still have a situation like in Berlin we had in January, where you have basically, parts of the city without electricity. The motivation, again, from a business perspective, doesn't matter. Is this now a hacker attack? Or was that anything else? The impact on the business side is still that I need to sustain my operations. And I think this is where we need to be careful not to overinvest on the prevention side and completely forget that the costly part is how long does it take to get our stuff together and be able to respond to a situation.
And thanks for that, Patrick. Again, great insights. There's one piece here, because you're talking about frontier models, and I'm looking at AI as a really great value add in certain scenarios, but I also look at it as the potential to undermine the capability of a workforce. And I had Rahim Hirji on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about this idea of synthetic seniority, where people are coming with these brilliant ideas, but they don't understand the building blocks. They haven't got the knowledge, or they haven't failed previously in the technology, and therefore it falls apart. But when I extrapolate that onto the resilience conversation, I'm thinking, as we empower people more to utilize artificial intelligence across different processes and to define different outcomes, if that capability is no longer available, do we need a human resilience lens that comes in under all of this to go, are our workforce still capable when the machine doesn't do the thinking?
Yeah, but isn't that basically, again, you have a lost scenario, right? So AI in the end is still a technology. I think there's also a philosophical component to AI, and what does it mean for the business. But when it comes to, how much we rely on external systems to do the thinking for us, sure, but quite frankly, what's the difference with the electricity, right? It's very, if you decide to completely depend on, one source for electricity, energy, and so on, and then everything runs on that, and I have zero processes anymore, which by the way is not reality anyway. But so I think there, from a pure resilience management or strategy perspective, I would not necessarily be too worried about where innovation will bring us, right? I would just always try to be very clear and figure out as well with business what the implications are, what it means, and what the confidence levels are, that if that capability is gone, that we can sustain our operations, right? And if we can, then everything is great, right? Why would I not leverage innovation and technology to do it? So I get the point around, having high reliance on the systems. But honestly, I think we've seen that since over 100 years, that with any innovation, we completely shift the reliance. I think the other component around people pretending that they know stuff that actually they don't know, or things, don't adding up. Every organization will make their own learnings there, I think. It's new still. It's been around for a couple of years, but I think in terms of, enterprise adoption of AI, everyone is trying and playing around, and everyone is making their learnings. From a resilience perspective, what I can see is similar to other areas. I think is, if you have bad processes today, right, AI is a great tool to help you accelerate these bad processes so you get even worse outcomes later. So you mentioned before, right? You can throw into your favorite LLM, write me a BCP for this and that. Awesome, right? Maybe if you're lucky, you can generate 1,000 BCPs. It's not going to help you that much. So I think from a resilience perspective, we also have an opportunity to leverage the innovation that's there, what it can do, and take that as an opportunity to maybe revise a couple of processes that we have.
Very balanced, Patrick. Very balanced indeed. You didn't say anything controversial there at all, which is unfortunate for my soundbite, but brilliant for the conversation. um, Patrick, I want to switch for a second and talk a little bit about the co-founder and setting up a business, and the reason for this is I talk to a lot of people who have come from consultancy or from a background that's deeply technical, and then they've gone into business, they've built a company and an operation, and started to make a success of it, etc. The one thing that I always look at, and I find it very admirable, is there's a purist view sometimes in consultancy around the lines that must be in place for an organization to be secure or be resilient, etc. When you swap into the owner position and the checkbook is on your side of the desk around what it costs to do certain things, those decisions become a lot more pointed. Did you experience that piece where you kind of went, this is what perfection looks like, this is reality, we're going to be somewhere in the middle here to make this
You
work?
mean as an operator, as
An operator, switching
yeah,
from the consultancy piece into, I'm now a business owner.
yes,
Now the bills stop with me.
yeah,
Therefore, the decisions
yeah,
need to be balanced in the
yeah,
pragmatism of
yeah.
profitability and all of those things.
Oh, I love that, Francis. Thank you. I was lucky because I had almost like a transition period out of consulting. I then was leading in a lean tech company already, security and resilience. So I came, from the big corporate consulting world where you tell me or I tell you basically what you have to do. That's good practice. This is how it's done, and then you have like a long shopping list. To you, I came in with a long shopping list, and they're like, "Sure, go ahead, do it." And like, well, I can't do that on my own. It's like, well, then you got to prioritize. So that was the first big kind of almost like inspiration to start something like Resume. It's like, oh my god, right? If you don't have unlimited resources, it's going to be very difficult to prioritize and know, where do I get the biggest bang for the buck. So concretely for us, I think what helps us tremendously is that we have a risk management background, right? We're coming from cybersecurity, we're coming from cyber resilience. So for us, it's a non-negotiable. So I had experiences I give you a very concrete example. I had experiences in the past. You have software as a service providers that may use a multi-tenancy architecture. That means you have in one shared infrastructure, you have different client environments. Now, I saw in companies what it means if that multi-tenancy architecture breaks. So that means, one client can, because it's everything living in the same database, one client can access data from the other client. Not great. Especially not great explaining your clients why that happened. And even if the impact is not good, or sorry, is not great or not massive, you still don't want to be in such a situation. So for us, it was clear we're going to put in a single tenancy architecture, right? Every client is completely isolated on their own. The same now with LLMs, right? It's very, very easy, for instance, to kind of like go out and build a wrap around Claude or any of these, LLMs, and then say like, I have this amazing AI tool. It's not super secure, right? And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So we're making a lot of conscious decisions in our design, and I think we try to be very balanced between, and we almost like live what we're trying to preach as well, is the documents are not going to save you, right? It's the actual capability, having the things in place, and the Pareto principle. What are the 80-20 rules in terms of if you do these things, isolation, encryption, access management, right? You get pretty far with these concepts. And if then someone comes and says like, I want to see your third-party cyber risk management assessment process, or evaluation criteria, we will be able to handle these conversations, if you know what I mean. So your point on prioritizing in a real operational environment, that's the very core of why we even build resumes.
No, that's perfect. And I had to ask because I remember this struck me. I was doing the SABSA course a number of years ago, and the instructor at the time said, "I'm teaching you guys all this stuff now, but if you come to me as the CEO of this business and tell me I need to do something, you better have a goddamn reason why I have to do it before I put my hand in my pocket and spend the money. And don't
Yeah,
point back to my book." You know? And I just went, this is a beautiful, scenario where the the reality of who owns the purse strings dictates what gets done. And I think it's something that we miss sometimes as technical individuals or in a consultancy lens, that someone has to pay for this to be enacted at the end of the day. So you better be sure it's worth the money. And that's why I always find it interesting to ask that question to business owners who have stepped over the line from one world to another to see what it is. So that's a great insight, Patrick. So thanks very much for sharing it. Patrick, before we finish up, I want to talk about tabletop exercise for a minute because I've mixed opinions here, and I'd like to get your viewpoint. Are they useful, or do they just kind of reward people for performing preparedness?
So, because we use so many analogies today, one for tabletop, the one I like most is it's very similar. If you want to be fit and strong and healthy, right, you shouldn't go to the gym once a year for 7 hours and hope to be fit for the rest of the year, right? You're gonna be sore for a week, and then that's pretty much it. And I think you should go more frequently, right? Maybe you go every week, and maybe you just do like 2-3 times for 30 minutes. It's definitely more valuable. And I think the exact same way about the tabletop exercises. I think if you do it for, optimizing on, I need to do one exercise per year, and then it's 7 hours, and then, it can be valuable, but it can also be like, months and months of preparation. Then one great day, everyone high fives saying that was a great experience. And then, the day after, you have like 149 follow-up action items. And then 3 weeks later, no one really remembers them anyway. So I think tabletop exercises can be incredibly powerful when they bring people together, when they are fed by a real foundation, right? The foundation we said we're going to build for the house, understanding how your business works, what are the dependencies. You map the loss scenarios, right? If you take these things that real are, and then you have the right people together and they just start talking together and how things would actually work and run, then tabletop exercises, even if it's just 20 minutes, can be super valuable. If it's just a walkthrough, right? How would we do that? Would we be able to do that and have an honest conversation rather than a performance conversation? I think that's an incredibly powerful way to start the whole planning and capability building journey. And then you can increase the sophistication, right? If you feel like, look, we've been talking about this, people know each other, people know how we would actually respond. Now let's start testing it, right? And let's start testing it not just in a function, but maybe cross functions. And I've seen tabletop exercising going through 4 different days where you have, from the SOC escalation into a production environment, into the executive team having to make a decision on ransomware, all the way to the recovery team actually recovering. You can, again, if you try to connect these dots, you immediately see the value if that's not made up but real. So rather than once a year for 7 hours, let's do smaller exercises more regularly, different kind of scenarios. And if we feel quite confident, we can, start also functional testing going in there, critical path recovery. I think there's like no shortage of good ideas on what you can do to test your confidence levels.
So my takeaway from that is tabletops without theater have value, but make sure it's in the raw, honest conversation that shows the lineage through the organization. So that's again a great insight, Patrick. Patrick, before we finish up, is there anything I've left on the table here that you want to bring to the listeners, or have we got through all of the key points?
I think it was a great conversation, Francis. If I wrap up on my side, I think for years we have optimized on documents, building a lot of documents, chasing people to do it. In reality, resilience works in a way that we build capacity and that we use capacity, and the ownership is with the business. So we are here to enable and support them. In the end, the plans might be useful for planning, but when something hits, it's really about the people that have built the trust beforehand, that know the shared principles, they know how the rhythm works, so that you condense the time you're actually able to respond and be able to withstand and absorb any types of hit, regardless if it's from the AI or a snowstorm.
Patrick, it's been lovely having you on. Thanks for the synopsis at the end to bring it all together. Really insightful conversation. Have a great day.
Thank you, Francis. Have a good one.
Thank you.